Hello again. Hello and welcome to your regular dose of Call My Bluff, the game of truth or dare. Daring to be different and occasionally telling the truth, the team led by Sandy Toksvig.
Thank you, Bob. My first guest has trod the boards, graced the screen and triumphed on television. It has been a fabulous career in the world of the thespians, so she thought she would join the hoi polloi for half an hour. Please welcome Frances Barber. Guest is really only comfortable with old masters. So here to work with Bob and Alan, please welcome that art critic extraordinaire, Brian Sewell.
And in the first round, anyway, the team desperately trying to spot that moment of truth, the team led by Alan Coren.
Thank you, Bob. Hello. Well, on my left today, a brilliant author, journalist, reporter, presenter, a veritable mistress mind. Will you welcome, please, Sally Magnusson? And on my right, another triumphant child of a triumphant father, proving that the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. In this case, with a bit of a thump. Will you welcome, please, that mighty man of theatre, Sheridan Morley?
All of which calls for the rules. Sandy's team are going to begin by defining a word 3 different ways. Only one of those definitions is true. Alan and his team will try to work out which it is. Now, the first word today is a real cracker. Obreptitious. Sandy.
Yes, now, I'm going to address myself to Sherry, because I've known him for quite a long time. I think you may have heard, right, that occasionally I say unpleasant things about Alan on this programme, and you're probably horrified. You're probably horrified about it, but I do try to couch it very carefully. So, it's, oh, you've woken up.
I was putting down couch it very carefully and wondering what you were talking about, but carry on.
No, I do try. I say occasional things about Alan. I will say, for example, interesting tie, Alan. Do you not have the benefit of a mirror in your dressing room? Or I might comment on the difficulty of concentrating as the lights glint off the top of his head. And I do none of this to be horrid. That's what I'm saying to you, Sharon. I do none of this to be horrid. I do it simply because I am the most honest woman in the country. I simply do not have it in me to lie, and that is what makes this game so difficult. Because sometimes I must be obreptitious. Now, if I want to win a point, I want Bob to go 1 to Sandy's team, I have to lie to you 3 lovely people opposite. I have to produce something containing a false statement in order to obtain something I want, which is a point on the board. So obreptitious is something with a lie in it, told in order to gain something, unless, of course, I'm lying.
Yes. Thank you. Frances.
Well, I've recently bought a new flat. And because the mortgage is so enormous, it's probably quite lucky that I don't have any money left, because I keep changing my mind about how I'm going to furnish it and how I'm going to have it decorated and whatever. It's like these 2 karma beads I'm wearing. One is for passionate romance, and one is for tranquility and calm. And that means I am obreptitious because I'm indecisive.
Ah, thank you. Brian.
This word appears in the top left-hand corner of page 1532 of the smaller Oxford Dictionary. Very simply, it is described there, because they don't go into the whole business where the word came from, as the adjective for a scientific conclusion drawn from a haphazard happening in nature. This can be illustrated by the apple that fell on Newton's head. There he was, sitting in his mother's garden, when wallop, right on his bald pate, came the apple. And he let out a cry, echoing the ancient Greek, Eureka, because he suddenly recognized that he had discovered the force of gravity. So there you are. It is simply, it is a conclusion, a scientific conclusion, drawn from an accident of nature.
Thank you. So it's either a false statement made for the purpose of gaining something, or being indecisive, or to draw scientific conclusions from a haphazard happening in nature, an accident in nature, in fact. It's Obreptitious and it's Alan.
Got to do a lot of writing here. They were very full and delightful. All from the beginning. When Sandy said, I'm going to address myself to sherry, I was amazed. It's normally I'm going to address myself to gin. Changing career in mid-term. Then she went on with a wonderful sort of compilation programme of things she said to me. It was like listening to Auntie's insults. I mean, we went back over old nasties. So it's a lie told in order to gain something. All most lies are. We lie here for 14 and 6 an hour. Now, France is indecisive. I'm totally... If it's the word Obreptitious about yours, I may well come back to it. And Brian, page 1532 of the smaller Oxford Dictionary. There is no smaller Oxford Dictionary. Did you mean the shorter Oxford Dictionary, or the concise Oxford Dictionary, or the rubbish Oxford Dictionary I just made up? So you said the small Oxford Dictionary, and Newton wasn't bald. I have the big boys' book of bald heroes. I keep it right there. Newton looked like Tarzan on a bad hair day. So I know that's not true. I think I want to come back to the little insulting drunk over there. I think well, I love Sandy so much, despite the insults. I'll go for Sandy.
Right. We got the message, Sandy?
Would I lie to you?
Ah! Yeah. Well done. There's a fourth statement made for the purpose of gaining something, Obreptitious, and we pass on to Khalasi. It's Alan's.
Goodbye, old thing, cheerio,
so
chin
sorry.
chin,
Sorry.
toodaloo, na-poo, goodbye. Now, why would I so abase myself in front of the viewing hundreds at
I
home?
have no idea.
Well, it's because I've got to get around to the First World War and the way in which Tommy Atkins, innocent soldier serving abroad for the first time, went to France and couldn't speak any French at all, but had to use them. Now, in that toodaloo, na-poo, why toodaloo? It's a corruption of à tout à l'heure. Why na-poo? It's another farewell to his darling. It's ne pleure pas. Just as plonk comes from vin blanc, just as red biddy is the closest you could actually get to red Bordeaux. It was just an attempt to come to terms, just to be able to communicate at all and come back with this jargon. Those who were lucky enough to come back. And then there was the Second World War, when they fought even further abroad, and they fought in North Africa. And if blokes in the 8th Army wanted to take time off at Alamein for necessary natural purposes, they went to the Qazi. And Qazi is another corruption of the Arabic word Khalasi, which is an Egyptian water closet.
Thank you, Alan. Sally.
Come with me, if you would, on a voyage. Call My Bluff.
Yes.
Ship
Anywhere.
in full sail. Captain Holness there, with his one good eye to his telescope, keeping a wary lookout for strange new words. First mate Toksvig, parrot on her shoulder, yelling instructions.
You played a part of parrot.
Well, it might be first mate Toksvig, or it could be the parrot. Often a lot of difference.
Hey.
There you go. Now, the crew, manning the rigging, the deckhands, those who keep the ship from not sinking, as it undoubtedly would without them. They are the Khalasi. They are the servants. They are able-bodied. They work aboard the ship, doing the more menial jobs, but keeping the thing going.
Thank you, Sally. Sherry.
Yes, you know, you have these well-known phrases and sayings which we use without ever thinking what they really mean. The best example I know is the actor at Stratford, I'm sure Francis knows, who is playing Hamlet, and every night he says, there is a divinity shapes our ends, rough hew them how ye may, without really knowing what on earth that meant. And after about 6 months, he's walking home one afternoon after the matinee across the fields in Stratford, and he's rented a cottage somewhere for the summer, and he meets a couple of farmers, and they're cutting down a hedge. And he says to them, why does it take two of you to cut a hedge? And one of them says, well, you see, I rough hew the edges, and he shapes the ends. And it was a Warwickshire farming metaphor from 1600, which had been passed down. Nobody ever knew what it meant. Another one of those is, don't look a gift horse in the mouth. Well, why not? And what is a gift horse? Well, think about that for a minute. It's to do with teeth. The way you tell the age of a horse is, of course, as Sandy will know, by its teeth. That's how you tell whether it's a horse or not. But also it's the age. And if you are given something and you then examine it too closely, i.e. you start complaining that your gift horse is 140 years old and hardly a gift, then it ceases to be very polite. So what a Khalasi is, in fact, is the word meaning a gift given by somebody to you, usually somebody in a rather richer position, which you are not supposed to complain about.
Right. So, it's an Egyptian water closet, or it's a servant, especially one employed on board ship, or it's a gift from someone else, someone above you in status. It's a Khalasi, and it goes to Sandy.
Now, I've spent in my time quite a lot of time in Egypt, and because curiously, it's a rather good place to go diving. And if you want to go and be excused, you do it in the wadi or in the sand. I don't think it's so posh as a water closet. Now, Sally, mesmerising. I drifted off, frankly.
I'm sorry about the parrot.
No, darling, I'd have gone anywhere with you. I'd have gone on a pea-green boat and married a pig. I thought it was fabulous. And I like this because I hate sailing a lot, and the idea of servants doing it for you is a fabulous notion, so I'm very keen on this. Now, Sheridan, it's a gift not to complain about, but you didn't say where it comes from. Which was
The origin originally is probably Indian. I would think the ha is a giveaway there.
You would think.
It's possibly, I think it probably is. It isn't widely known for sure.
Yes,
could be Hungarian, could be Indian.
Right.
That's enough she needs to know, thank you.
Right.
Okay, so
I was
I
only
think
being
it's
helpful.
Sally.
Sally,
Thanks a bunch.
your card, please. A servant, especially one employed on board ship. Khalasi. Right. On with lunge with Nandine to Francis.
Is the Pope a Catholic? Does Alan Coren sport a majestic head of hair? Does a bear do something or other in the woods? All these are rhetorical questions. And that is what a Nandine is. It's a rhetorical question. And it's, in fact, Shakespeare does refer to it in Titus Andronicus, in which he says, "Ask me no questions and put Nandines from my mind."
Thank you. Brian.
We've all got a fairly good idea of just a jiffy, what that might mean. There is something called a millisecond, which is I think, 1,000th of a second. I stand to be corrected, but because I'm no mathematician. It's very small indeed. But then scientists decided they wanted something even smaller than the 1,000th, something like a 1,000th of a 1,000th. They thought if they kept on saying that, it would induce a sort of international lisp that might be rather confusing to everybody, and we will be back where we started from. And so they had to find a name for it. One day, Stephen Hawking was being pushed around the zoo, and he found himself confronted by the smallest ostrich in the world, which is called a nandu. And he said, that's almost right. The ending isn't perfect, but it's almost right. A nandine. We shall call this minute fraction of time a nandine. And it is therefore 1,000th of 1,000th of a second.
Stephen Hawking.
Right. OK, thanks, Sandy.
I wish you to imagine that Noah is sitting on the porch in front of his house, and his wife says to him, "Looks like rain." And he says, "What?" Because the man is 900 years old. Now, frankly, his wife was lucky he had a pulse. And God, this is a bit I don't get, right? God sends a message and says to Noah, "I want you to build a boat, and I want you to put 2 of every animal on this boat." Now, this would be, I imagine, quite a big boat, a lot of animals. And if you're building it, in your driveway, you think that your neighbours might make 1 or 2 comments, don't you? And it's not anywhere in the book, And he can't tell them what he's doing. If you come around, they go, "What you doing, Noah?" And you go, "I can't tell you, but here's a hint. How long can you tread water?" And then the animals start gathering, you feel there would be talk. The elephants and the birds are not so bad, but the nandine makes a terrible racket because it is a sort of West African mongoose that has been around since the Ark, or indeed because of the Ark.
Thank you. Right, here we go. It's a rhetorical question. That's the easy one. or it's a minute fraction of time, 1,000th of a second, or it's a sort of West African mongoose. It's a Nandine, and it's Sherris.
I think we'd have come across Nandine in one of those Shakespearean glossaries, so I don't think it's Shakespearean. Brian, sort of ranging from a very small jiffy bag to Stephen Hawking being pushed around the zoo, synonyms for a nanosecond, all that is wildly unlikely. Which brings us back to Sandy. Home life with Noah. I have a terrible feeling that Sandy is right and that this actually is a West African mongoose. So I'm going to go for Sandy.
Right. The card, Sandy?
Would I lie to you?
Well, right. Yes.
Fantastic.
A sort of West African mongoose, a Nandine. Brings a score to 2 to Alan's team, 1 to Sandy. And we continue with Veilleuse. It goes to Sally.
It's the turn of the century, turn of the last century, and I, with my pioneering sense of adventure, am about to go out for a drive in one of these newfangled motor cars. So I step outside, it's raining, I hasten to add. I put on my hat, goggles, long coat, crank up my engine at the back, clamber onto the front seat, which is exposed to the elements. So I take a blanket, cover my knees, but my feet are still a bit cold and liable to get wet. So I pull across my Veilleuse, which is covering, which actually is tailor-made for these early motor cars. It pulls across, it buttons on both sides, pulls across, covers right over your knees, your feet, allows you to have a wonderful ride in comfort.
Thank you, Sally. Sherry?
We're going back to about 1830, and we're going back to Middle Europe, sort of Germany, Hungary, Austria. In those long-lost days, before we had CD players, you had to make your own music, and the violin was at its apex at that time. But many people couldn't actually play the violin, although it was very desirable that they should do so. So an amazing inventor came up with a violin that had a handle, and it was shaped like a violin, but slightly longer at the base, and there was a wheel. And you turned this wheel, and amazingly, out of this music box violin came the sounds of a violin. It was known as a key violin. The key was really to how to turn the handle, but if you could manage to turn the handle, even if you weren't musical, you could fool people in other rooms that you were playing the violin. It was a great invention.
Thank you. Alan?
If you pursue the peripatetic life of a hack or a teleperformer, you have to stay in a lot of hotel rooms, often just for one night. So you never get a chance to familiarise yourself with the room, and all hotel rooms are different. The disposition of the television set, or the sofa, or the occasional chairs, or those low tables, or the dress, all in different places. The only thing that's always in the same place is the light switch, which is beside the door, as far away from the bed as possible. Now, if for any reason you have to get up in the middle of the night, because all this furniture is lying about and the light switch is over there, before you get to the bathroom, you've got a gash on your knee, you've got 7 stubbed toes, and a heel covered in whatever it was you didn't eat on the supper that was on the tray on the floor from room service. It's horrible. That doesn't bother me, because I have a Veilleuse, a little battery, a little single tiny bulb, and I carry it about with me. It's my night light.
Thank you, Alan. So it's a waterproof covering for early motor cars. It's a hand-operated key violin, around 1830-ish, or it's a nightlight Alan keeps by his bed. It's a Veilleuse, and it's Francis.
A violin, I think that contraption, it's far too extraordinary that they could have invented it, certainly in 1830. So I'm not tending towards that. I'm neither tending towards this curious word for a nightlight. It doesn't seem to me have any connotations to do with that at all. So but I think I'm going to go for Sally's blanket covering your feet.
Okay, correct or not? Show us, Sally.
You're absolutely wrong.
Oh, well. Now there's a surprise. Which of the two gentlemen has the correct one?
As my wife never watches television, Francis, come back with me and I'll show you my Veilleuse.
Yes, it was a nightlight, a Veilleuse, after that. On we go to Uvarovite. This goes to Brian.
Uvaravites were very small but highly cultivated society, nation, whatever, like the Hittites or the Israelites, also from the Near East. And they occupied part of what we now understand to be Israel before it was divided amongst the 12 tribes. When the Egyptians swept in and took all the Israelites to Egypt to work as slaves, they also sort of bundled up the Uvarovites with them. But they discovered when they got them to Cairo and Thebes and places of that kind, they were frightfully good at mathematics and engineering and invented the pyramid and how to build it. The consequence was that they got completely swallowed by Egyptian culture and have been almost totally forgotten, except by Egyptologists. And the last manifestation of their culture was the Fayum portraits, which were painted more or less when Christ was born, and embellished the lids of their coffins, so we know what they looked like.
So is it what's the Uvarovite?
It's a civilization.
It's a civilization.
Well, call it a civilization if you like. Yes,
Yes, we'll do that. I think that's a good idea.
It's Sandy.
People who order too much glue in DIY shops cause loose talk. I think that's a fair thing to say. And I'm still thinking about the Ark, okay? Now, the man, no, he was 900 years old. He should not have been playing with power tools. I do feel...
Mortis and tenon.
Sorry?
You
Write
never
it down,
did
it's his
woodwork at
solicitors.
school.
I don't know what he's talking about. It's a kind of glue. I've lost the will to live. That's
That's it, is it?
Well, I had a long story about Noah and sniffing, but I can't be bothered.
Okay, let's let Francis take over.
Mr. Uvaro was the first person to identify a very precious and rare garnet. And I happen to have seen one of these gems. I was filming in Prague, and it's, for some reason, I don't know, they sell huge amounts of garnets in Prague. And the red ones are very normally easy to come by. But the garnet, the green one, I don't have, that's a red garnet, is an Uvarovite. It's a precious green gem.
Right, so it's an ancient Middle Eastern civilization. It's a kind of glue, or it's a precious and rare green garnet. Uvarovite, Uvarovite. Sally.
I feel bereft. I wanted a story about Noah's Ark. I wanted it, Sandy. And I feel unable to judge without that story. I mean, a kind of glue. What kind of glue? I mean, where do I go with a kind of glue? Now, moving on to the Hittites, or the, the ancient, whatever they were, tribes. I'm no Egyptologist, and on no grounds whatsoever, I feel that that is not right. I don't remember ever coming across the Uvaro, Yours sounds plausible, Francis, which of course then makes me wonder.
Go for one.
Francis, okay, I go for you.
Right,
the
Francis,
garnet, the whatever it was.
The card, please.
The jewel. Yes!
Oh, well, yes, well done. A precious and rare green garnet it was, Uvarovite. Well done. Let's see what comes up next. Tasajo, that's sherry.
Yes, no reflection on Bob's pronunciation. This, of course, is Tasajo. And as that would indicate, it's Japanese. Those of us who have studied kabuki and no drama, as in the phrase, there's no business like show business, will know that, of course, the Japanese theatre has many and splendid words for strange moments in the saga. Most kabuki plays last about 8 hours, and at some moment, night falls, which is kind of it's like listening to Brian Sewell, really, but it's reassuring. And about 5 hours into a kabuki drama, suddenly the day is over and night comes, and to indicate the fall of night, because they don't do much with electric lights, someone says, "Ta-sayo!" And that means that absolute darkness is about to descend, and what's more, it's a symbolic kind of darkness, meaning evil. So it's a double use of the word Tasajo, and it means we're getting very dark, and also you're in deep trouble. Hence the word.
Wonderful, wonderful, thank you. Alan.
Now, just look at me, or Brian, or Bob, or Sherry. Are we not the picture of radiant health? Do we not look extraordinary for our enormous combined age? And that's because we all grew up in the war. when, despite the fact that everything was rationed, there were loads of ersatz food like pom and powdered egg and snook, we actually had, as nutritionists now tell us, a wonderful diet. Now, the nutritionists aren't entirely right. We also had something else, because school children of that age used to wear satchels with leather straps. And every school child during the war sucked the leather strap of his satchel until it became wrinkled and hard, and it was full of protein. Sort of like Tasajo. Because Tasajo is sun-dried strips of buffalo meat, just like a satchel strap. Delicious.
Thank you, Alan.
Can I ask you what a snook is?
It's a fish.
It's a fish,
Yeah,
child.
Subsidiary question. Sally?
Tasajo, it is. Remember all those 1930s films where the hero's the ordinary American guy, simple, down-to-earth, honest, usually played by Gary Cooper, Jimmy Stewart. They were all examples of John Doe, your average American chap. The habit of calling men John or Joe in America became commonplace around the 1930s and 40s. If you remember, men in the US Army were referred to as G.I. Joe. Joe College was a college boy. Joe Sixpack, you can guess. Joe Smo was a sort of undistinguished sort of fellow. There's a rather patronizing feel to a lot of these expressions, which you can also detect, I think, in Tasajo, which is slang for a Japanese guy in the United States, a member perhaps of one of the quite sizable Japanese communities in the United States.
Fair enough. Absolute darkness or evil. Sun-dried buffalo meat cut into strips, or a Japanese American guy, ordinary American man. It's either Tasajo, Tasajo, or Tasajo. Whichever, it's Brian's.
Well, I think if it was Joe, it would have an E on the end. The Americans we know can't spell, but I don't think they'd actually go as low as that. So I think that's out. I'm not sure about this sort of pemmican. Do they have buffaloes in Japan? It was a frightfully theatrical performance, and I thought quite wonderful. And I feel I ought not to have been convinced by it, but somehow I think I have to go for the Japanese theatre performance, The Fall of Darkness.
Think he's talking about you, Sherry? No.
No,
So,
no.
now let's see who's got the right definition. So, after all, it was the sun-dried buffalo meat cut into strips, Tasajo. And that brings the programme to a close with the score 5 to Alan's team and 1 to Sandy's. Time to say goodbye from Francis Barber, Sandy Toksvig, Brian Sewell, Sally Magnusson, Alan Coren, Sheridan Morley, and from me too. Until next we meet, goodbye, good luck.
More piercing looks from Anne this afternoon on BBC Two, The Weakest Link, from 5:15.